Welcome to the Mystery and History channel. Be sure to subscribe and like so you don't miss out on more videos like this one. A jaw able to open almost 80 degrees and a dog-like body striped across the back made the thylacine, or Tasmanian tiger, the largest carnivorous marsupial of the modern world. Between 1888 and 1909, the Tasmanian government paid bounties tied to the removal of more than 2,000 animals, accusing the species of harming sheep flocks, although later studies showed that its jaw was too weak to handle adult sheep. At the Barbary Zoo in Hobart, the last known specimen, Benjamin, was filmed by naturalist David Flea in 1933 in a rare 62-second moving record that became the symbol of the species. The ending came on the night of September 7, 1936. A mistake in the zoo's routine left him outside the shelter during a sharp temperature drop. Benjamin did not survive. Shortly before the species received legal protection, a late recognition of the importance of preservation. Flocks so huge they darkened the sun for hours. That was how passenger pigeons dominated North American skies in the early 19th century. Within a few decades, commercial trapping and the clearing of beech and oak forests, which were essential to their survival, reduced the population to almost nothing. Thousands were captured and shipped in train cars to markets such as New York and Chicago, where they were sold for extremely low prices. Isolated in a cage at the Cincinnati Zoo, Martha spent her final years alone and even received poor treatment from some visitors. On September 1, 1914, she was found lifeless in her enclosure. Preserved for study, the specimen was sent to the Smithsonian Institution, where it remains a symbol of the impact human action can have on biodiversity. In 1971, during a snail survey, Hungarian biologist József Vagvolgyi came across a single male giant tortoise on Pinta Island and named him Lonesome George. He was the last of one of the 15 lineages of Galapagos giant tortoises, animals that for centuries served as a fresh meat reserve for whalers, kept alive on board because of their ability to withstand lack of water and food. The situation had already been critical since 1959, when goats introduced by fishermen devastated the island's vegetation. For decades, attempts were made to breed him with females from other lineages, but only infertile eggs resulted. George died on June 24, 2012, at more than 100 years old, ending that distinct lineage and exposing the limits of human intervention in preserving biodiversity. Only a few dozen bucardos remained on the slopes between Spain and France as the 20th century neared its end. Celia, the last female of this Pyrenean ibex subspecies, was captured in 1999 in Ordesa National Park for study, fitted with a radio collar and sampled for skin cells before being released. On January 6, 2000, she was found lifeless beneath a fallen tree, marking the official end of the subspecies. The story, however, had a second chapter. Thanks to frozen cells, Spanish and French scientists cloned a new bucardo in 2003, a first for an extinct animal. The newborn survived for only 7 minutes because of a lung malformation. Celia thus became a symbol of two interrupted attempts to preserve her lineage and of biotechnology's limits in the face of biodiversity loss. They called it the goddess of the Yangtze. The baiji, a freshwater dolphin found only in that Chinese river, had a long, thin beak and small eyes that were almost useless in the muddy water, so navigation came through sonar. Starting in the 1950s, industrialization took its toll. Increased boat traffic, fishing nets with hooks, illegal electric fishing, and construction of the Three Gorges Dam damaged the habitat, while engine noise disoriented its navigation. Chi-Chi, an injured male rescued in 1980, lived 22 years in captivity at the Wuhan Institute and became the face of the species. In 2006, a scientific expedition traveled about 2,175 miles of the river with hydrophones and observers without finding a single living baiji, leading to the declaration of functional extinction, a clear example of the irreversible impact of human action. Green feathers, a yellow head, and an orange face distinguish the Carolina parakeet, the only parrot species native to the eastern United States, found from New York to the Gulf of Mexico. Its relationship with farming was tense. Flocks invaded orchards and destroyed apples and corn, leading farmers to hunt them down. Their social behavior made the problem worse because capturing one bird drew in the whole group and made the rapid decline of the flocks easier. Demand for colorful feathers for women's hats in the early 20th century, along with the clearing of riverside forests, reduced breeding areas and caused an irreversible decline. The last specimen, Incas, lived at the Cincinnati Zoo until February 21, 1918, months after the loss of his mate Lady Jane. Caretakers noticed his sadness and suggested that he deeply felt the absence of his companion. Quagga was the animal's sharp bark that gave rise to the name Dutch settlers gave the quagga, a zebra subspecies from southern Africa. Its appearance was unmistakable, with stripes only on the front of the body and the rest a plain brown, like an ordinary horse. Between 1863 and 1870, photographer Frank Hayes, together with Frederick York, produced 5 rare plates of the only female kept at the London Zoo, acquired in 1851. Although common on the plains of the Cape Colony, intense exploitation for meat and hide reduced the population until it vanished within a few decades. Farmers did not even notice the decline, convinced that zebras were abundant. The last specimen lived at the Artis Zoo in Amsterdam until August 12, 1883, and only afterward was it recognized that the species had disappeared, turning the images by Hayes and York into valuable historical records. Some suspect that the heath hen may have appeared at the first Thanksgiving meal because it was once so abundant along the eastern coast of the United States. Overhunting and the conversion of open fields into farmland caused the bird to disappear from the mainland around 1870, leaving only an isolated population on Martha's Vineyard in Massachusetts. A reserve created in 1908 raised the number to almost 2,000 birds, but breeding season fires, harsh winters, outbreaks of avian flu, and the arrival of predators reversed the gain. In 1929, Booming Ben was the only survivor, returning every year to the same field to perform his lonely mating dance, inflating the air sacs on his neck while waiting for a mate that no longer existed. He was last seen on March 11, 1932. It was considered the most beautiful song in the Hawaiian Islands, delicate and melodic. It was the mark of the Kauai-u, a bird found only on the island of Kauai. Black with yellow tufts on its legs, the bird lived in high forests whose elevation at first protected it from mosquitoes carrying avian malaria, a disease brought by ships in the 19th century. With no natural immunity, the populations retreated farther and farther into cooler regions until Hurricanes Iwa in 1982 and Iniki in 1992 destroyed their last habitat. In 1987, a biologist managed to record the last known male singing his part of the mating duet, followed by silence as he waited for an answer that never came. The moment captures the extinction of a species and represents a painful chapter in environmental conservation in Hawaii. The construction of the Kennedy Space Center in the 1960s sealed the fate of the dusky seaside sparrow, a rare and almost entirely black subspecies that existed only in the marshes of Merritt Island and the St. Johns River on Florida's central coast. To control mosquitoes, wetlands were artificially flooded, destroying the dry grasses essential for the bird's reproduction. Then the draining of marshes for farming and construction eliminated the last refuge. By 1979, only 6 individuals remained, all male. Late rescue attempts brought these birds to an enclosure at Disney World, hoping to cross them with related subspecies, without success. The last of them, called Orange Band, blind in one eye and about 9 years old, died on June 16, 1987, an ending that illustrates the conflict between technological progress and environmental preservation. When biologist J. Savage described the species in 1966, he doubted his own description. No amphibian should have had such vivid orange. It was the golden toad, found only in the Monteverde cloud forest in Costa Rica, with orange males and females marked by scarlet spots. Its breeding behavior was unusual, as they emerged in large numbers during brief rainy periods to reproduce in temporary pools. In April 1987, biologist Marta Crump counted about 1,500 individuals, a number outside the known pattern. The next year, only one male remained, probably the same one seen in 1989, a sign of population collapse. After May 15, 1989, the species disappeared, becoming a tragic symbol of amphibian decline caused by chytrid fungus and changes in the cloud forest mist pattern, and a reminder of the fragility of specialized species. Smaller and darker than its mainland relatives, the Javan tiger was adapted to the dense forests of Java, Indonesia. In the early 19th century, it was so abundant that many farmers saw it as a threat to local activity. But rapid human population growth and the conversion of forests into coffee, rubber, and rice plantations drastically reduced its habitat. In 1938, Dutch naturalist Andries Hoogerwerf photographed a living Javan tiger for the first and only time in the Ujung Kulon region, an image that remains the most reliable record of the species. Around 1940, the animals were already restricted to small isolated mountain areas, and the last known specimen had its end recorded near Meru Betiri National Park in 1976. Declared extinct by the International Union for Conservation of Nature in 2003, the subspecies returned to debate in 2024, when genetic analysis of a hair collected in Java reopened discussion about its possible survival. They called it Australia's most elegant kangaroo. Silver gray fur and pale stripes on the rump distinguished the two-lake wallaby, which lived on the wet plains of southeastern South Australia and western Victoria. In the early 20th century, hunting for its skin, the draining of swamps for agriculture, and the invasion of the European red fox drove it to extinction in the wild around 1924. A late attempt to save it through captures for breeding only drained the last individuals. In 1936, curator Bernard Cotton recorded a female on 16mm film, possibly the last of the species, and the footage was forgotten for decades. When the material was rediscovered, it revealed a rare color sequence of about 30 seconds, the only existing color film of the animal, which survived in captivity until 1939. Extremely elaborate antlers with dozens of open points shaped like a basket made Schomburgk's deer unmistakable on the flooded plains of the Chao Phraya River Valley in central Thailand. In the early 20th century, demand for the antlers in traditional Chinese medicine and the conversion of wetlands into commercial rice fields destroyed both habitat and population. The only known photograph of a living animal was taken in 1911 at the Berlin Zoo, where a male had lived since 1899, a gift from a German director of the Thai Railway. The last known specimen was kept as a pet at a temple in Samut Sakhon province until in 1938, an incident involving a drunk man led to the loss of the final animal, an ending with no official records. The case shows how unintended human interference and predatory exploitation led the species to a silent extinction. In 1494, during his second voyage, Christopher Columbus ordered 8 Caribbean monk seals to be taken as food for the crew, the first European record of a New World marine mammal. Over the next 4 centuries, settlers and whalers heavily exploited this gentle species, especially for the oil obtained from the animals, preventing any natural recovery. Around 1910, some individuals were kept at the New York Aquarium, where they were photographed alive in an artificial setting, showing the sturdy body and rounded snout that marked the species. The last confirmed sighting happened in 1952 on a small sand formation between Jamaica and Nicaragua. Later, aerial searches found nothing. The species was officially declared extinct in 2008, the result of overexploitation and the vulnerability that its own docility created in the face of human contact. From Turkey to northwestern China, through Iran, Kazakhstan, and the area around the Caspian Sea, stretched the range of the Caspian tiger, one of the largest cat subspecies ever recorded. With dense orange fur, it was the imposing predator of Central Asia's deserts and forests. In the 1920s and 1930s, the Russian Empire began to see it as an obstacle to agricultural expansion, especially cotton farming, and promoted official population control campaigns along riverbanks. The 1899 photograph taken at the Berlin Zoo is one of the rare records of the animal alive. A tiger kept in captivity in a stone enclosure surrounded by iron bars. Reliable reports ended between the 1950s and 1970s, and extinction was declared in 2003. Later genetic analyses revealed an almost complete similarity to the Siberian tiger, adding nuance to the debate over the conservation of Asia's big cats. Taken in large numbers by the Romans for arena displays, the booble held its own place in North African imagination, as shown by depictions in ancient Egyptian tombs. This antelope lived from Morocco to Egypt, but 19th century European colonization, new technologies, and sport hunting reduced its populations, limiting it to small groups on the Atlas Plains. The only known photograph of a living booble was taken by Louis Medland in 1895 at the London Zoo, an ordinary animal behind a fence, now an irreplaceable document of an extinct species. The last captive female lived at the Jardin des Plantes in Paris until November 9, 1923, without people at the time fully understanding the environmental and cultural loss it represented. The story of the booble brings together human exploitation, environmental change, and the almost silent forgetting of an emblematic species from Africa's past. Standing about 3 feet 3 inches tall at the shoulders, the hemipi, or Syrian wild ass, was the smallest wild horse relative in the world and crossed the deserts of Syria, Iraq, and the Arabian Peninsula. Ancient Assyrian texts already mentioned it, proving its long presence in the region. Unlike the domestic donkey, it was never domesticated. Its wary temperament and impressive speed frustrated repeated attempts over the centuries. With World War I came new technologies and motor vehicles, which reduced its escape advantage and made capture much more effective. About 9 photographs of the animal remain today, taken in European zoos such as London, Berlin, Schönbrunn, and Vienna, where the last captive specimen lived until 1927, around the same time the last wild animal disappeared at the Azraq Oasis. In 1923, the Tanager expedition took the Smithsonian Institution to Laysan Island in the Hawaiian archipelago to document its wildlife. It was there that Donald Dickey recorded silent film of one of the last 3 Laysan honeycreepers, a scarlet-red bird found only on that small island, which fed exclusively on nectar from local flowers. The species had already been in a critical state since the introduction of domestic rabbits in the late 19th century, whose appetite devastated the vegetation and turned the island into a sandy desert. A few days after the filming, a sandstorm swept across Laysan and wiped out the last birds for good. Silent and brief, this visual record is the only testimony to the existence of the Laysan honeycreeper, a tragic symbol of human impact on fragile and isolated ecosystems. Unable to fly, the Laysan rail made up for it by running across the island floor with the agility of a mouse. Its ruin came from outside. Rabbits introduced to Laysan destroyed the native vegetation and eliminated the bird's main food source, the Laysan honeycreeper, causing the population to collapse around 1923, as the Tanager expedition observed. Before that, some specimens had been taken to Midway Island, where they formed a stable population for decades. In 1943, however, an American ship grounded during the World War II brought rats to Midway, which quickly preyed on eggs and chicks. The last bird disappeared in 1944. The case illustrates the devastating effect of invasive species on fragile island ecosystems and the difficulty of any preservation attempt during wartime. In December 1931, an expedition on horseback crossed the dry central plains of Australia in search of an almost mythical species. Mammalogist Hedley Finlayson wanted to confirm reports about the desert rat kangaroo, called ulaconta by Aboriginal people, a rabbit-sized marsupial that had remained unknown to science for decades. Within a few days, his team saw and captured a dozen animals and produced the only photographs ever taken of them alive. Finlayson described one ulaconta running 12 miles ahead of the horses under the burning sun until it collapsed from exhaustion, a picture of the endurance of that desert runner. After 1935, there were no reliable sightings, and almost all scientific knowledge of the species comes from those observations, revealing the fragility and mystery surrounding the wildlife of the Australian desert. Discovered only in 1973 on the remote slopes of Haleakala Volcano in Hawaii, the pouli was a small brown bird with a black mask around its eyes. It fed on native snails and faced a rapid decline because of mosquito-borne avian malaria, the destruction of the understory by wild pigs, and egg predation by introduced rats. By the mid-1990s, fewer than 10 individuals remained. In 1997, only 3 were left, each isolated in a different area of the forest, with no chance of natural contact for breeding. Captive breeding attempts were made, including moving a female near a male, but she returned to her original territory. One of the last captured males died on November 26, 2004, and the others disappeared without record. Extinction was declared in 2019. Maps from the Edo period already recorded the Japanese sea lion, an animal known to fishermen in the Sea of Japan and nearby areas such as Korea and the Lioncourt Rocks. In the early 20th century, intense commercial hunting, driven by demand for oil, leather, and whiskers used as pipe cleaners, devastated the population, with thousands captured, especially before World War II. Live pups were taken to circuses in Japan, where they performed in shows documented in photographs from the 1930s and 1940s. The destruction of coastal habitats combined with constant hunting led to the disappearance of the species, whose last reliable sighting occurred in the 1970s. Declared extinct in 1994, the Japanese sea lion never had conservation programs and remained only as a reminder of uncontrolled environmental exploitation. A lineage about 150 million years old fit entirely into less than 1 square mile. It was Round Island, a small volcanic island near Mauritius, and the only home of the burrowing boa, named after it. A subterranean snake, it depended on fertile soil and native vegetation to survive, hunting geckos under plant cover. Goats and rabbits left by sailors in the 20th century devastated the local flora and destroyed the palm roots that supported the deep soil the species relied on. Without that environment, it could not survive. The last confirmed sighting was on August 22, 1975. Although later expeditions, such as the one in 2001, found no survivors, extinction was only made official by the International Union for Conservation of Nature in 2021, evidence of the irreversible impact of human action on fragile ecosystems. If you enjoyed this video and want to support the channel, please use the Super Thanks tool below. Your contribution helps us keep bringing you amazing historical content. Thank you so much for your support, and see you in the next video.